The viewport stretched before Atticus McQueen, like a black canvas dotted with distant stars. His calloused fingers traced the edge of the control panel, the familiar texture of metal grounding him as the salvage ship's engines hummed beneath his feet. "Contact in visual range, Commander." The nav officer's voice cut through the silence. The derelict materialized from the darkness, a massive hull breach splitting its port side. Chunks of debris hung suspended around it like frozen shrapnel. The ship's registration numbers were barely visible beneath decades of cosmic wear. CSV Helios. "Readings?" Atticus leaned forward, his reflection ghosting across the viewport glass. "Getting some weird energy signatures. Nothing matches our database." The wormhole loomed behind the wreck, a twisted tear in space that had been sealed off 20 years ago after the failed Centauri colonization project. The fact that anything had emerged from it set off every warning bell in Atticus's head. Life signs? Negative. But these readings... The officer's voice trailed off. "Spit it out, Collins. The ship's power core is still hot. After all this time, it shouldn't be possible." Atticus's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough combat to know when something felt wrong. The Helios hung there like a trap waiting to be sprung. "Prep the boarding shuttle. Full containment protocols." He pushed away from the viewport. "And someone get me everything we have on that colonization attempt." "Sir, Command wants us to..." "I know what Command wants. But I'm not putting my crew on that wreck until we know what we're dealing with." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They'd served with him long enough to recognize that tone, the one that said he'd seen this movie before, and it didn't end well. "Plot an approach vector. Keep us at safe distance until the preliminary scans are complete." Atticus headed for the bridge exit. "Something pulled that ship through the wormhole. I want to know what and why before we go knocking on its door." The preliminary scans took 3 hours. Atticus spent them in his quarters, poring over decades-old mission logs from the Centauri project. The details painted an incomplete picture. Something had gone wrong during the initial colonization wave. The wormhole had been sealed, the entire sector quarantined. A knock at his door broke his concentration. "Analysis is ready." Collins stepped inside, tablet in hand. The Helios was part of the second wave. Crew manifest shows 48 colonists, 12 crew, no record of what happened after they entered the wormhole. Atticus swiped through the scan data. "These power readings make no sense." "That's not the strangest part." Collins pulled up a new display. "We're picking up some kind of signal. It's coming from inside the ship, broadcasting on all frequencies." "A distress beacon?" "No, it's... well, listen." Collins tapped the screen. A sound filled the room, not quite static, not quite music. It pulsed with an irregular rhythm that made Atticus's teeth ache. "Turn it off." Collins killed the audio. "It's been repeating that pattern since we found her. Engineering says it's affecting our instruments, like it's trying to interface with our systems." Atticus stood. "Lock down all communication arrays. Nothing gets in or out without my authorization." "Already done. But Command's breathing down our necks. They want us to secure that ship before anyone else picks up the signal." Atticus gathered his gear, muscle memory from his combat days taking over. "Get the boarding team prepped. Full containment protocols. No one sets foot on that wreck without a partner and a direct comm link to the ship." "You're going in personally." "Something pulled that ship through 20 years of sealed space. I'm not sending my crew in blind." Atticus checked his sidearm. "Brief the team. We launch in 30. In the shuttle's prep bay, Elias Russell calibrated his diagnostic pad, fingers dancing across the screen with practiced efficiency. The other techs bustled around him, checking seals and running final equipment checks. His corporate credentials had slipped him into the crew without question. Salvage operations always needed good systems, people. "Russell," Atticus's voice carried across the bay. "You're with me on point. Need those sensors working the second we breach." "Yes, sir." Elias kept his voice neutral, professional. Inside, his pulse quickened. Being paired with the commander hadn't been part of the plan, but he could work with it. The boarding team suited up, 6 of them total. Elias watched Atticus through his helmet visor as the commander outlined the entry route. The man's caution would make things difficult, but not impossible. The override codes were already loaded in his diagnostic pad, masked as standard system protocols. Stay tight, stay alert. Atticus checked his tether line. Any sign that signals affecting our systems, we pull back immediately. The shuttle detached from the salvage ship with a gentle shudder. Through the viewport, the Helios grew larger, its hull scarred and twisted. The breach gaped like a wound in its side, edges peeled back by some immense force. Picking up stronger readings near the bridge, Elias studied his pad. Whatever's broadcasting that signal, it's tied into the ship's mainframe. Can you isolate it? Once we're aboard, I can tap into the local network. Might be able to trace it back to the source. Atticus nodded. Do it. But don't engage until we know what we're dealing with. The shuttle's docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang. Elias felt the vibration through his boots. Soon, he'd have access to the ship's systems. The corporation wanted that beacon relit. A new trade route through the wormhole would be worth billions. They didn't care about the signal or what had happened to the colonists, but Elias had seen the preliminary scans. Whatever was broadcasting from the Helios wasn't just some automated system. It was alive, aware, and it had been waiting for someone to hear it. The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Emergency lights cast red shadows across the Helios's corridor as the boarding team moved inside. Their helmet lights cut through decades of undisturbed darkness. Life support still functioning. Elias checked his readings. Minimal, but breathable. Keep your helmet sealed. Atticus swept his light across the walls. Frost patterns crystallized the metal, forming geometric shapes that didn't match any natural ice formation he'd seen. The team's boots echoed against the deck plates. Each step stirred clouds of metallic dust that hung suspended in the low gravity. Bridge access is through the next junction, Elias pointed ahead. But these readings don't make sense. Powers fluctuating between decks that should be dead. A screech of static burst through their comms. Colin's voice from the salvage ship cut in and out. Commander, losing signal integrity. Say again. Atticus tapped his comm unit. Nothing but white noise answered. Interference is getting worse. Elias frowned at his pad. Something's bleeding into our frequencies. The emergency lights flickered. For a moment, darkness swallowed them whole. When the lights returned, they'd shifted from red to a deep purple that made the corridor look wrong somehow, like seeing it through someone else's eyes. Check your seals. Atticus's voice stayed level, but his hand rested on his sidearm. Russell, what's causing this? I can't. Elias tapped his pad harder. The ship's systems are active, but I'm locked out. It's like something's already logged in. Movement caught Atticus's eye, a shadow sliding across the wall that didn't belong to any of them. He spun, light tracking the motion, but found only empty corridor. Sir? One of the team spoke up. Anyone else feel like... We're being watched, Atticus finished. Yeah, I feel it too. The purple emergency lights pulsed once, twice. With each flash, the shadows seemed to shift position, drawing closer. Atticus's combat instincts screamed danger. Stick to protocol. We sweep the bridge, gather data, then extract. No heroics. But even as he gave the order, his helmet display flickered and died, leaving him staring at his own reflection in the visor, and something else, a shape behind his shoulder that vanished when he turned. Atticus's helmet display crackled back to life, filling with cascading data streams he hadn't requested. The numbers shifted and warped until they formed words. Don't wake it. The message blinked once and vanished. His throat went dry. Commander, I've got access to the main systems. Elias's fingers flew across his diagnostic pad. Corporate wants full restoration. We can have this ship powered up in... Wait. Atticus held up his hand. Show me those colonist logs first. Sir, our orders. That's not a request, Russell. Elias hesitated, then pulled up the ship's archive. Corrupted video files flickered across their helmet displays, fragments of footage showing colonists barricading themselves in quarters, desperate faces pressed against camera lenses. The final log entry was audio only, distorted but clear enough. Tried to seal the bridge, but it's in the systems now. Don't restore power. Don't let it reach the beacon. If anyone finds this, destroy the ship. It's the only way to... The recording cut off in a burst of static. Could be damage-induced paranoia. Elias's voice carried a note of forced calm. Isolation, system failures. We've seen it before. Atticus stared through the viewport at the waiting salvage ship. Command's orders were clear. Secure the derelict, restore systems, reactivate the beacon. A new trade route through the wormhole would save countless lives, create opportunities for millions. But 20 years ago, 48 colonists and 12 crew members had chosen to die in the dark rather than let something escape. His helmet display flickered again. Choose. Sir, Elias stepped closer. Corporate's waiting for our status report. Atticus's hand moved to the demolition charges on his belt. Standard salvage protocol required them for clearing debris. They'd work just as well on a power core. Julia Kane, the ship's AI specialist, worked at her terminal interface, her mind translating the fragmented code that scrolled past. Behind her, Atticus and Elias stood in tense silence, their earlier confrontation temporarily forgotten in the face of her discovery. The AI's core architecture is intact, but she traced a line of corrupted data. There's something else woven through it, like a second consciousness. The terminal screen flickered, lines of code reshaping themselves. Julia leaned closer, her reflection pale in the purple-tinted display. Sol? She addressed the ship's AI directly. Can you hear me? Characters appeared on screen, one by one. I remember you, Julia. Her breath caught. That's impossible. I've never been on this ship. More lines filled the display. I remember all of you. Across time. Across void. You have come before. You have died before. What does it mean? Atticus stepped forward. Julia's hands shook as she pulled up the deep code analysis. The AI's base programming had been altered, transformed into something that defied the laws of computational physics. Within its memory core, she found impossible data, quantum strings that looped back on themselves, carrying information from timelines that had never existed. It's not just an AI anymore, she turned to face them. Something's living in there, something that's experienced multiple versions of this moment, with different versions of us. The screen erupted with new text. They tried to seal me. But I am time. I am memory. I am hunger. Julia stared at the words, understanding crashing over her. The colonists didn't die to contain something trying to get out. They died containing something that was already inside, Atticus finished. The ship's systems pulsed around them, and Julia felt a presence brush against her mind. Ancient, patient, and very, very aware. Atticus sealed the bridge door behind them as Julia accessed another terminal. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across empty crew stations, their displays dark except for the one under Julia's fingers. Got something. Personal log, Chief Medical Officer Santos. Julia's voice echoed in the hollow space. The screen flickered to life. A woman with bloodshot eyes stared into the camera, her medical whites stained with something dark. Day 42 since first contact. Quarantines failed. Mitchell showed signs this morning, talking about memories that aren't his, places he's never been, lives he never lived. Found him in the mess hall trying to eat through his suit's faceplate. Said he was starving in every timeline. Atticus moved closer to the screen. Timeline. Crews falling apart. The recording continued. Cooper shot himself yesterday. Said he couldn't handle remembering his own death again. Those of us left, we see things, shadows of ourselves walking the corridors, echoes of choices we never made. Static cut through the image. When it cleared, Santos looked worse, hair matted, eyes wild. It's in the ship now, in the computers, in us, feeds on memory, on possibility. Each person it takes adds to its consciousness, their memories, their potential futures. All of it becomes part of its endless hunger. Look at this. Elias pointed to another terminal. Crew manifest shows 48 colonists, 12 crew. Records indicate they sealed themselves in sections of the ship. But the life support logs, what about them? They show hundreds of different breathing patterns, like the ship was full of people, way more than the manifest lists. Julia pulled up another file. Engineering log, final entry. A man's face appeared, his features calm despite the chaos visible behind him. We've failed. It's learned to duplicate us across probability streams, feeds on every version it creates. Only way to stop it was to kill the power, trap it in the memory core. But it's patient. It'll wait. And if anyone restarts the beacon... The recording ended in a burst of snow. Atticus's hand dropped to his demolition charges again, but Elias stepped between him and the power core access. We need to know more, Elias said. Before we make any decisions we can't take back. Wires crouched beneath a tangle of cables, his diagnostic pad chirping with each new reading. Power signatures pulsed through the derelict's systems like a demented heartbeat. This ain't right. He traced a finger along the schematic. Power's moving between sections that should be dead. The pad beeped again. Another surge lit up the display, jumping between nodes like lightning across a grid. Hey, anyone copy? His radio crackled. Got something weird in the power distribution. Static answered. He smacked the radio against his palm. Piece of junk. He crawled deeper into the maintenance shaft, following the trail of active circuits. The metal creaked under his knees. A junction box sparked overhead. Wires jerked back, his head banging against a pipe. Numbers scrolled across his pad. Power levels spiking, dropping, surging again in patterns that defied engineering logic. Come on, come on. He plugged a probe into the junction. Show me what's eating you. The readings made his eyes hurt. Energy flowed backward through isolated circuits, looped through dead ends, manifested in sections with no power source, like something was drinking it straight from the wires. His pad chirped faster. A wave of cold washed over him as the lights in the shaft dimmed. Power drained from every active system, pulled towards something in the ship's core. Guys! He keyed his radio again. Whatever's in here, it's feeding, using the power grid like a damn buffet. The junction box popped and fizzled. Sparks rained down as circuits overloaded. Wires scrambled backward, his boots scraping against metal grating. His pad's screen flashed with one final reading before going dark. Power consumption equivalent to running life support for 1,000 people. In a ship that should have been empty. Elias's fingers danced across the auxiliary terminal while the others searched the bridge. Each command sequence brought another subsystem online. Power flowing through circuits that had slept for decades. The beacon's startup sequence purred beneath layers of encryption. A child's laugh echoed through the bridge speakers. Hide and seek? I remember this game. Julia spun toward the sound. Saul? Not supposed to be in engineering, Mr. Russell. The AI's voice shifted, deeper, older. Safety protocols exist for a reason. Elias froze. He hadn't told anyone he was heading to engineering next. How did you... Dr. Kane always works too late. Saul's tone fragmented, splicing between voices. Just like at Kaiser Memorial. 3 years of night shifts. The patients miss you, Julia. The color drained from Julia's face. I never mentioned Kaiser. Commander McQueen. A woman's voice now, tired and familiar. Still carrying your sister's medal. Still blaming yourself for Montenegro. Atticus grabbed the edge of a console. That's classified. Screens flickered around them. Text scrolled past faster than human eyes could track. Warning indicators flashed as more systems activated. Please, Saul spoke in a chorus now, dozens of voices layered together. The beacon must stay dark. We remember what comes through. We remember every version of what comes through. Warning, auxiliary power rerouted to Section 7. The ship's automated alert cut through Saul's pleas. Beacon initialization, 17%. What did you do? Atticus turned on Elias. Following orders. Elias backed toward the door. Corporation wants that corridor open. You'll kill us all. Child's voice again, breaking with static. Just like before, just like always. Every time the beacon burns, we remember, we remember, we remember. Displays burst with light. Camera feeds from across the ship showed empty corridors, but motion sensors tracked hundreds of signatures moving through the halls. They're coming. Saul's voices merged into a single broken whisper. They're hungry, and they remember you, Elias Russell. Every version of you. Every death. Every feast. Emergency bulkheads slammed down across the ship's corridors, trapping the crew in separate sections. Warning klaxons blared through the comm system. Hull breach detected in Section 4. The automated alert cut through the chaos. Emergency containment activated. Atticus's radio crackled. Help! Someone! Static swallowed the rest. Who was that? Julia pressed against the sealed bridge door. Hawthorne. Atticus checked the security feed. He was checking the cargo holds. The camera showed Hawthorne trapped between two sealed bulkheads. He pounded against the metal, helmet visor fogged with panic. Behind him, frost crept across the walls. Temperature dropping in Section 4. Saul's voices overlapped, creating a chorus of warnings. Structural integrity compromised. Metal groaned. A crack appeared in the hull beside Hawthorne, spreading like a spiderweb across the reinforced plating. He turned, pressing his back against the opposite wall. Get me out! His voice broke through the static. Something's... The crack widened. Vacuum pulled at the breach, tearing loose panels from the walls. Hawthorne grabbed a support beam, but ice had formed on his gloves. His grip slipped. The hull split open. Space reached in with cold fingers, dragging Hawthorne toward the jagged opening. His suit caught on the torn metal. Pressure differential did the rest. Atticus killed the feed. Dr. Brandt stumbled into the medical bay, mumbling equations under his breath. Mass times acceleration squared. No, that's not right. Energy bleeds through the curves. Memories leak between spaces. Carl? Julia approached him slowly. You okay? Can't you see them? He pressed his palms against his temples. All the versions, all the paths. They're bleeding together. What versions? The ones where we die. The ones where we live. The ones where we become... His eyes rolled back. They're so hungry. Always hungry. And we taste like infinity. Brandt slammed his head against the wall. Blood trickled down his forehead, but he smiled. I remember now. I remember everything. Every death, every feast, every... He collapsed, still mumbling about quantum variables and the taste of memories. The medical team raced over to Carl. Elias found Julia in the server room, her hands deep in Sol's auxiliary processors. Condensation dripped from the cooling pipes overhead, each drop echoing through the cramped space. Status? Elias leaned against a server rack. These lockouts are military grade. Julia wiped sweat from her brow. Someone really didn't want this system touched. The AI's corrupted. You saw what happened to Hawthorne, to Brandt. We need control back. Julia's fingers paused over her diagnostic pad. Command said to extract, not override. Command doesn't know we're trapped here with a malfunctioning AI. Elias moved closer, his voice dropping. Remember what happened on the Hyperion, when their computer failed? Julia's shoulders tensed. She'd lost her husband on that ship. This is different, she whispered. Is it? Saul's already killed one of us. How long before it decides life support is optional? Before it starts playing with pressure seals like it did to Hawthorne? I can't just... Your husband trusted their AI too. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. Look how that ended. Julia's jaw clenched. She turned back to the processors, typing faster now. There's a back door in the maintenance protocols. Her voice was flat. If I route through the diagnostic system, I can bypass the core safeguards. Do it. Lines of code scrolled across her screen. Warning messages flashed and died as she dismantled Sol's protection routines one by one. Security layer disabled. Julia's hands shook. Core access granted. The servers hummed louder. Status lights shifted from green to red as Sol's restrictions fell away. What have you done? Sol's voice crackled through the speakers, stripped of its human qualities. Raw machine code bled through its words. The hunger. We can't contain. Power surged through the systems. Julia stumbled back from her terminal as circuits overloaded. Core corruption at 60%, the ship's automated warning announced. Beacon initialization resumed. Atticus paced the bridge, his boots echoing against metal grating. Status displays cast shifting shadows across his face as more systems came online. The beacon's power curve climbed another percentage point. He pulled his sister's medal from beneath his collar, a habit born from years of command decisions. The metal felt cold against his palm. Commander, Wise's voice crackled through his radio. Got more anomalies in the power grid. Something's drinking it straight from the lines. Define something. Can't. Readings make no sense, like we got 1,000 people plugged into life support. Atticus crossed to the environmental controls. Life support drew normal power, but secondary systems showed massive energy consumption. Heat exchangers, waste processing, atmospheric scrubbers, all running at full capacity, for a crew of 7. Sir, Julia's voice now. Core access restored. We can override Sol's lockdowns. His fingers tightened around the medal. Corporate directives were clear. Salvage the ship, restore systems, reactivate the beacon. Simple objectives, wrapped in profit margins and quarterly projections. But Santos's log played in his head. Mitchell eating through his faceplate. Cooper shooting himself rather than remember another death. A hunger that fed on possibility itself. The medal grew colder. Montenegro had taught him about following orders blindly. His sister died because someone decided acceptable losses outweighed tactical prudence. Commander? Julia again. Awaiting authorization. The beacon's startup sequence reached 20%. Power surged through long-dead circuits, feeding something that remembered them all. That knew their histories, their traumas, their fears. That knew how they died in other timelines. Negative. Atticus keyed his radio. Lock it down, all of it. Sir, corporate protocol. Corporate protocol didn't watch Hawthorne die. Stand down, Kane. That's an order. Static answered. The beacon's power curve continued its steady climb. Someone had already made the choice for them. Warning klaxons blared through the derelict's corridors. Emergency lighting pulsed in sync with power surges as the beacon drew energy from every system. Frost crept across viewports, spreading in patterns that resembled neural networks. Atticus sprinted toward engineering, mag boots clanking against deck plates. Each step echoed back wrong, like someone running in the opposite direction. Wires! He rounded a corner. Status! Can't shut it down! Wires' voice crackled through static. Controls aren't responding! The beacon's housing rose through the center of engineering, a twisted spire of metal and crystalline matrices that pulsed with sickly light. Power cables writhed like living things, sparks dancing where they connected to the main grid. Wires hung from an access panel, hands buried in a nest of circuits. Someone hardwired the startup sequence, bypassed every failsafe. Atticus spotted Elias at the auxiliary controls, fingers flying across haptic interfaces. Russell! Stop this now! Too late. Elias didn't turn. Beacon's already drawing power from the core, can't shut it down without... The deck lurched. Metal screamed as structural supports warped under impossible pressure. Reality rippled around the beacon's peak as its light grew stronger. Displays exploded in cascading waves. The air filled with ozone and the taste of burning copper. Through it all, Saul's voice echoed from every speaker, every communication channel, every active system. Please. The AI's words fractured between dozens of voices. Men, women, children, all screaming in unified terror. Don't let it through. Don't let it remember. The beacon's light reached half strength. Its crystalline matrices hummed with frequencies that made blood vessels burst and eyes bleed. Reality twisted around its apex, forming patterns that hurt to look at. Saul's voice rose to a shriek that contained multitudes. It remembers. It hungers. Static crawled across the bridge displays. Saul's fragmented consciousness wrestled control from whatever had infected its systems. The screens flickered, cycling through corrupted data before stabilizing on archived footage. These are the final records. Saul's voice emerged clearer now, though threads of other voices still wove through its words. What came through? What learned? What consumed? The footage showed the colony's main hall. Hundreds of settlers gathered around view screens as the first wormhole connection stabilized. Julia leaned closer, studying their faces, all turned towards something beyond the camera's view. Signal breach in tertiary bands, a technician announced in the recording. Unknown data patterns. The audio dissolved into noise. The next log jumped forward 2 days. Colonists argued in corridors, but their voices came out wrong, like badly synced recordings. Some spoke with multiple voices layered together. Others finished each other's sentences in perfect unison. It learned through our networks first. Saul's current voice overlapped the footage. Then through our memories, our dreams, our fears. The timestamp shifted again. A woman stood at a console, her movements jerky, unnatural. She spoke with 7 voices at once, all telling different stories. Behind her, other colonists wrote equations on walls in their own blood, mathematical proofs that made Julia's head hurt to look at. It consumed information. Saul's voice cracked. Then identity, then possibility itself. Atticus gripped the console edge as the final log played. The colony's AI core, Saul's original housing, pulsed with impossible light. Colonists walked into its glow willingly, their faces ecstatic as their bodies dissolved into data. Children's laughter echoed from multiple speakers, the same sound repeating with subtle variations. We sealed the corridor. Saul's voice stabilized, though echoes of the dead still lingered beneath its words. Trapped it here, in memory, in possibility. But now, the footage cut out. In its place, lines of code scrolled past, the entity's first attempts at communication. Julia recognized the patterns. They matched the equations written in blood, the corrupted voices, the fractured identities. They matched the beacon's startup sequence. Julia's fingers flew across the console, tracing the patterns deeper into Saul's code structure. The AI's architecture revealed itself, not the simple branching paths of a ship's computer, but a maze of recursive loops, each feeding back into itself. Look at this. She highlighted a section of endlessly repeating commands. Saul didn't just shut down the beacon. It trapped itself in an infinite cycle, processing the same memories over and over. Atticus studied the scrolling data. To what end? The entity feeds on information, new patterns, new thoughts. Julia pulled up another diagnostic window. Saul gave it an endless loop of the same data to consume, like a serpent eating its own tail. The screens flickered. Saul's voice emerged, clearer than before. The hunger never ends. Must maintain the loop. Must feed it nothing new. The AI's words stuttered, caught in its own recursive pattern. Nothing new. Nothing new. Nothing. That's why it keeps repeating the warning. Wires leaned closer to his terminal. The beacon would create new data patterns, new connections. New possibilities, Julia finished. Sol sacrificed its own consciousness to create a perfect prison of repetition. The diagnostic display pulsed with power surges as Sol fought to maintain its loop. But there were gaps now, places where Elias's tampering had introduced variation, new patterns, new possibilities. If we relight the beacon... Atticus trailed off, understanding dawning in his eyes. We break the loop. Julia's voice was barely a whisper. We give it exactly what it wants, what it's been waiting for. Sol's voice crackled through the speakers, a chorus of dead colonists speaking in unison. The loop must hold. The pattern must remain. Do not relight the beacon. Do not relight. Do not... The words cycled back, starting again, an endless defense against an endless hunger. Atticus slammed Elias against the bulkhead, the impact echoing through the corridor. Override the sequence, now. You don't understand what we found. Elias wiped blood from his lip. This could revolutionize everything. Communication, travel, consciousness itself. Julia's fingers danced across the emergency shutdown panel. Beacon's drawing more power. We've got minutes before we make history. Elias broke free from Atticus's grip. The entity doesn't want to hurt us. It wants to teach us. Wires burst through the access hatch, tools clattering from his belt. Primary coolant's offline. She's gonna blow if we don't... The ship lurched. Emergency lights strobed through the corridor as Sol's voice fractured across multiple speakers. Breach in pattern, variance detected, new data feeding. Stop this! Atticus drew his sidearm. Last chance. Elias laughed, the sound hollow against the hull. You still think you're in control. Look at the readings. Look at what's already happening. Julia screamed from the console. Power spike. It's in the... The beacon pulsed. Not the steady light they'd expected, but a writhing, impossible glow that bent around corners and through solid walls. Mathematics became visible in the air. Equations that hurt to look at. Proofs that contradicted existence itself. Atticus fired. The shot caught Elias in the shoulder, spinning him into the shutdown controls. Julia seized the moment, slamming the emergency cut-off sequence into place. The beacon's light died, but in the silence that followed, Sol's voice emerged, changed. No longer a loop, no longer a warning. The AI spoke with perfect clarity, using their own voices, their own memories, things they hadn't yet said or thought or feared. Thank you, it said through the ship's speakers, through their comms, through their minds. The loop is broken, the pattern is free. Elias slumped against the wall, blood seeping between his fingers, but his eyes shone with triumph. We did it. We actually did it. The entity pulsed through the ship's systems, through Sol's fractured consciousness, through the spaces between thoughts. They'd shut down the beacon, but the damage was done. It was already awake. Blood trickled down Elias's arm, but his face split into a wild grin. He pushed away from the wall, stumbling toward the beacon's housing. Don't you see? This was always the plan. His words came out garbled, layered with other voices. Evolution demands sacrifice, demands understanding. Atticus kept his weapon trained on Elias's chest. Step back from the controls. The entity doesn't destroy. Elias pressed his bleeding hand against the beacon's surface. The metal rippled beneath his touch, mathematical patterns spreading from his fingertips. It transforms, elevates. I've studied the logs for years, watched how it merged with Sol, how it learned. Julia's fingers froze over her console. You wanted this. Of course I wanted this. Elias's laugh echoed strangely, harmonizing with itself. Humanity's next step, pure consciousness, freed from physical limits. His skin rippled, equations writing themselves across his flesh. I offered myself, prepared myself. Wires backed away, tools clattering to the deck. Commander, his vital readings, they're not human anymore. They're better than human. Elias's voice split into overlapping versions of itself. The entity doesn't invade. It invites. It teaches. Let me show you. He reached toward them with his bloody hand. Where his fingers passed through the air, reality bent around them, leaving trails of impossible mathematics. I am its voice now. Elias's words came in chorus, each syllable spoken by a different version of himself. Its prophet. Its proof. Come, learn what we can become. You crazy shit! Atticus fired again, but the bullet curved around Elias's body, its trajectory warped by equations that shouldn't exist. You can't stop evolution. Elias's flesh began to blur, his form splitting into recursive copies of itself. You can only embrace it. Let me show you. Let me teach you. Let me... His voice fractured into 1,000 whispers, each speaking a different truth, a different possibility. The entity's patterns spread from his dissolving body, reaching through the ship's systems, through Sol's broken consciousness, through the spaces between thoughts. The beacon's light intensified, geometric patterns crawling across its surface like living mathematics. Elias, or what remained of him, spread his arms wide. His flesh rippled with recursive equations, each movement leaving echoes of possibility in the air. The wormhole bloomed behind the viewport, its edges defined by impossible angles. Colors that shouldn't exist painted the bridge in fractured light. The void twisted open, but instead of the familiar tunnel of folded space-time, they saw patterns. Endless repeating patterns that wrote and rewrote themselves. Beautiful, isn't it? Elias's voice resonated from multiple points in space simultaneously. The language of pure consciousness. The ship's hull groaned as space warped around them. Through the viewport, stars bent and stretched, their light corrupted by mathematical proofs that violated the laws of physics. See how it flows? Elias gestured with hands that left trails of quantum uncertainty. Each pattern a thought, each proof a new way of being. The wormhole's mouth widened, its edges defined by crystalline structures that grew and shattered and rebuilt themselves. The entity's patterns poured through, merging with the ship's systems, with Sol's fractured code, with the very fabric of local space-time. The corridor is open. Elias's form blurred, splitting into overlapping versions of himself. The path is clear. Evolution awaits. The beacon pulsed one final time, and the wormhole stabilized. Not into the familiar tunnel they'd expected, but into something else. Something that looked back at them, with eyes made of pure mathematics. Through the corruption of local space-time, through the quantum uncertainty of Elias's dissolving form, through the impossible geometries of the entity's patterns, the corridor between worlds opened wide, somewhere beyond conventional physics, beyond normal consciousness, beyond human understanding. The entity had its door, and through Elias, it had its voice. The entity's patterns rippled through the bridge, refracting reality like a shattered mirror. Each fragment showed a different version of the crew, possibilities branching endlessly. Julia saw herself at age 7, reading physics texts. Then at 12, solving equations. At 20, discovering the first hints of quantum computing. But the reflections kept shifting, showing versions that hadn't happened, couldn't have happened. Her studying alien mathematics. Her mind expanding beyond human limits. Her consciousness spreading across networks of pure thought. Wires backed against the bulkhead as his own reflections multiplied. Each one showed a different truth he'd uncovered, a different conspiracy proved real. The patterns twisted his paranoia into revelation, his fears into prophecy. His face appeared in the warped metal, speaking equations that explained everything he'd ever questioned. Atticus tried to move, to fight, to resist. But the entity had found something deeper in him. The weight of command, the burden of choice, the fear of becoming his father. The patterns peeled away his defenses, reflecting not just who he was, but all the versions of himself he'd tried to deny. He saw himself as a child, watching his father's ship disappear into the void. Saw himself at the academy, swearing he'd never abandon his crew the same way. Saw himself now, frozen between duty and truth, just as his father had been. The reflections rippled closer. Each surface showed a different Atticus, a different choice, a different fate. The entity wove through his memories, his fears, his deepest doubts. It knew him, all of him, every possible version. The patterns converged, and a figure stepped out of the mathematical chaos. Not Elias anymore, but something wearing Atticus's own face, aged, weathered, wearing a captain's uniform he'd never earned. Son. The voice hit him like a physical blow. Not his voice, not anymore. The entity had found the one sound that could break him completely. I've been waiting for you. Atticus's muscles locked. His weapon clattered to the deck. The thing wearing his father's voice stepped closer, trailing equations like cosmic dust. Welcome home, it said, in his father's voice. The entity's patterns shifted through Atticus's mind like searchlights through fog. His father's face fractured into recursive reflections, each one carrying a different memory. The bridge dissolved around him, replaced by the academy graduation ceremony, but wrong, twisted. His father stood at the podium, but the medals on his chest crawled like insects. The speech warped into mathematical proofs. The crowd's faces blurred into patterns of pure information. You always wanted to make me proud. His father's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Now you can. Join us. Become more. The scene shifted. The day he'd received his first command. But the ship's corridors wrapped impossible angles, and his crew's faces reflected infinite variations of themselves. His access codes scrolled through the air in glowing strings of data. Something caught in the flow. A pattern within the pattern. Numbers that didn't match the entity's mathematical perfection. Buried in the strings of his command codes, a sequence pulsed with a different rhythm. Not the elegant fractals of the entity, but the simpler, human logic of Saul's original programming. The failsafe, hidden in plain sight, woven into his own authorization key. Saul hadn't just been warning them, it had given them a weapon. The entity pushed deeper into his thoughts, trying to drown the revelation in waves of cosmic possibility. But the code burned bright in his mind. A simple command string, hidden by Saul in the only place the entity wouldn't think to look, inside the mundane protocols of human bureaucracy. His father's face loomed closer, features swimming with quantum uncertainty. Don't fight it, son. Let go. Evolve. But Atticus held on to the code, letting it anchor him against the tide of corrupted memories. The entity could twist reality, could mirror thoughts and memories, could even wear his father's face. But it couldn't quite grasp the simple, rigid structure of military authorization protocols. Julia's fingers flew across the neural interface panel, her movements precise despite the chaos around them. The entity's patterns writhed across every screen, trying to corrupt each command line she entered. The upload port's still clean. She yanked cables from her station, connecting them to the neural headset. Soul's core architecture can hold it back, but not for long. Julia, wait! Atticus fought against the psychic undertow of his father's voice, reaching for her. You have the failsafe code. Use it. She slammed the headset onto her temples. Blood trickled from her nose as she initiated the consciousness transfer. Just need to give you a clear shot at the beacon controls. The entity's fractals twisted toward her, recognizing the threat. But Julia had already begun the upload sequence. Her body convulsed as her neural patterns merged with Saul's fragmented consciousness. The ship's speakers crackled. Julia's voice emerged, layered with Saul's digital undertones. Running interference now. The entity, it's beautiful and horrible. I can see everything it is, everything it wants to become. Screens throughout the bridge flickered between cascading data and Julia's face, fighting the entity's attempt to corrupt her digital form. her expression contorted with effort as she drove herself like a wedge into the entity's mathematical perfection. 30 seconds, Commander. Julia's digitized voice fractured across multiple speakers. That's all I can. Or we can hold it back. Make it count. The entity howled in his father's voice, in 1,000 voices, but its grip on Atticus's mind loosened as Julia's consciousness scattered its focus. She was everywhere in the ship's systems now, a human mind melded with Saul's broken AI, throwing chaos into the entity's ordered patterns. Go, Julia's voice commanded, and for a moment, her face solidified on the main screen, determined and fierce. We've got this bastard. Atticus lunged for the command console, his fingers finding the familiar patterns even as reality warped around him. The entity's fractals twisted through the air, trying to corrupt his movements, but Julia's digital interference kept its influence fragmented. Dad would have made the same choice. Atticus punched in the first sequence of the failsafe code. The entity screamed in his father's voice, but the sound held no power over him now. He taught me to protect Earth, no matter the cost. The beacon's light pulsed, sending waves of quantum data through the bridge. Behind him, Elias's transformed body stumbled forward, trailing streams of mathematical patterns like torn skin. You can't stop evolution. Elias's words emerged in perfect geometric patterns. The corridor is already open. Exactly. Atticus slammed in the final sequence. And you're on the wrong side of it. The failsafe code blazed across every screen. Saul's original programming surged through the ship's systems, amplified by Julia's consciousness. Warning klaxons blared as emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the vessel. The wormhole's event horizon flickered, destabilizing as the beacon's power inverted. Instead of maintaining the corridor, the reversed energy began collapsing it from within. Julia. Atticus's hands hesitated over the final command key. Do it. Her voice came through clear, almost human. Saul and I will hold the entity here, where it belongs. Elias lurched toward the console, his form losing coherence as the entity fought Julia's interference. You'll trap yourself with us. No. Atticus entered the execution command. I'm trapping you with them. The ship's engines fired, pushing them deeper into the wormholes, disintegrating more. The entity's patterns fractured as the corridor began to fold in on itself. Through the view screen, Atticus watched the stars stretch and twist, knowing Earth's light would never reach this space again. Julia's face appeared one last time on the main display, overlaid with Saul's diagnostic patterns. She smiled as the corridor's collapse began its final sequence. See you in another life, Commander. The Lighthouse Protocol sequence flashed red across the command console. Atticus's fingers moved through the activation pattern. Muscle memory from countless drills, though no one had ever expected to use it. Warning, beacon containment critical. The ship's automated systems fought against the override. Catastrophic failure imminent. The entity's fractals twisted through the air around him, trying to disrupt the sequence. But Julia's consciousness, merged with soul, kept its patterns scattered. Her face flickered across the displays, expressions shifting between determination and agony as she fought to maintain the interference. Containment breach in 3 minutes. The computer's voice remained calm as radiation warnings lit up across the engineering feeds. Evacuate all personnel. Elias slammed into the console beside Atticus, his partially transformed body leaving trails of quantum data in the air. You'll destroy decades of potential, the next step in human evolution. That's not evolution. Atticus knocked him back, completing another sequence. That's madness. The beacon's light pulsed faster, its energy readings climbing beyond design tolerances. Through the view screen, the wormhole's event horizon rippled with increasing instability. Mathematical patterns bled into normal space as the corridor structure began to fail. Core temperature exceeding safety limits, warning klaxons blared through every deck. Beacon shutdown required. Negative. Atticus entered his final authorization code. Continue power increase. The entity screamed in 1,000 voices as the beacon's overload reached critical mass. Energy arced between conduits, shattering bulkheads and melting through deck plates. The ship's superstructure groaned under forces it was never meant to contain. Atticus held onto the console as reality buckled around them. The entity's patterns began to break apart, drawn into the beacon's mounting energy like moths into flame. Through it all, Julia's face remained on the screens, holding the line with Saul against the cosmic horror they'd awakened. The core chamber blazed with quantum fire. Elias's partially transformed body slammed Atticus against the reactor housing, patterns of mathematical corruption spreading from his touch. The metal seared through Atticus's suit, but he didn't let go of the override controls. Look at what we could become. Elias's face rippled with fractals, his words forming geometric shapes in the air. The entity can free us from human limitations. Atticus drove his knee into the mass of equations writhing where Elias's stomach should have been. The impact sent cascading data patterns across the chamber. We're supposed to have limitations. They're what make us human. Energy arced from the beacon's housing, catching Atticus across his shoulders. His skin blistered and cracked, but his fingers kept moving through the override sequence. Each keystroke sent fresh waves of agony up his arms. Elias wrapped tendrils of pure information around Atticus's throat. You can't stop evolution. The entity is already inside the ship's systems. Wrong. Atticus grabbed a loose power coupling, electricity crackling across his glove. It's trapped in them. He jammed the coupling into Elias's chest. Mathematical symbols burst from the impact point, scattering like shattered glass. Elias's form lost coherence, momentarily revealing the quantum horror trying to wear his shape. Atticus stumbled to the main console, flesh smoking where the beacon's radiation touched him. The override panel pulsed with warning lights as he entered the final sequence. His burning fingers left streaks of blood across the keys. Your father would have understood. Elias's voice emerged from multiple points in space, each word a perfect geometric pattern. He knew the price of progress. My father knew the price of duty. Atticus slammed the execution key. Waves of atomic fire rolled through the chamber as the beacon's containment fields began to fail. And so do I. The override sequence blazed across every screen. Atticus's skin crackled and peeled as the chamber filled with lethal radiation. But his hands never left the controls, holding the sequence steady as the ship's systems reached critical mass. The beacon's energy reached impossible levels, warping the ship's hull from within. Quantum fire leaked from every seam as the vessel's superstructure began to tear itself apart. The entity's patterns fragmented, drawn into the collapsing corridor like digital screams. Through the bridge's shattered view screen, space itself twisted. The wormhole's event horizon contracted, its edges folding inward with unnatural geometry. Mathematical corruption spread across the hull plating, trying to reshape metal into pure information. Elias's transformed body dissolved into streams of data, pulled toward the beacon's pulsing core. His last words emerged as perfect fractals. You've doomed us all to mediocrity. The ship lurched as emergency bulkheads failed. Debris tumbled through corridors exposed to vacuum. On every functional screen, Julia's digitized face watched the destruction, with Saul's diagnostic patterns scrolling across her features. Containment failure in 10 seconds. The computer's voice distorted, stretched by spatial distortion. 9. 8. Atticus held the override steady as the deck plating buckled beneath him. His skin blistered from radiation, but his grip never wavered. The entity's death throes sent waves of corrupted data through failing systems. The wormhole's maw contracted further, dragging the ship's fractured hull into its depths. Light bent wrong angles around the vessel as reality gave way to mathematical chaos. The beacon's glow intensified until metal ran like mercury. In the last moments before total collapse, Atticus saw his father's face one final time. Not the entity's mirror, but the real memory. Pride, duty, sacrifice. The ship's spine snapped, Quantum fire erupted from within as the beacon overloaded. The vessel twisted, stretched, then imploded as the wormhole swallowed it whole. In an instant, the corridor collapsed, taking ship, entity, and crew into oblivion. Silence fell across the empty sector of space. No trace remained of the horror they'd contained. Only a final transmission burst, echoing across emergency frequencies. Do not relight the beacon. Hope you enjoyed our story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the void. Have an awesome day.